So we just got a hotfix to Diablo 4 that finally brought the problem child build of the Necromancer back into line. That's right, we got a nerf to Bloodlance of all skills? Well, hold on a second, because it turns out this is actually a good thing. And it was all because of this aspect right here, Hungry Blood. It says, and when Bloodlance hits a target that's already lanced, it had up to a 30% chance, if you have it on an amulet, to spawn another Bloodlance that shot at a random enemy. And it turns out that this was so buggy that this was actually going to be the introduction to a Bloodlance video that I never ended up making because I just couldn't show the build in action. We're playing the Bloodlance build, and I'm going to explain the Bloodlance build, and there's only one issue with the Bloodlance build right now, and that's the fact that the Bloodlance build absolutely lags out the entire server that you're on, and it makes it nearly unplayable, which isn't great, don't get me wrong. You'll notice that I've actually turned down the damage numbers, so you actually can't even see them in game right now. You also notice that like the game's weirdly lagging. Now that being said, it's because the Bloodlances are all kind of recurring against one another, like they're recursive, and they're all multi-hitting each other. The worst part is that this is the best blood build, and it's very, very good if it would stop doing this. So I'm actually going to literally take off the best item for this build so that you can legitimately see it in action. The problem being that it's then going to function much weaker than it would right now. So in response to that, the Diablo team had to act quickly because the Bloodlance builds were able to bring down entire servers. You could just walk out into the open world, spam a bunch of Bloodlances, and just completely crash every other person in your shard in a hell tide. It was like really bad. But the exact way that they've changed Bloodlance actually touches on two different parts of the skill. First, the enhanced Bloodlance, so just the base skill tree enhancement, will now only allow it to pierce up to a maximum of 10 enemies. So if you theoretically had infinite enemies in a line, and you were to roll successfully, you could pierce into each one of them, meaning that each one would then cause damage to the first target. And if it kept piercing like that infinitely, which it could effectively do once you added Hungry Blood to it, you had this recursive loop where they are all permanently triggering off of one another. The second part of this is that the aspect of Hungry Blood will only fire a maximum of 3 Bloodlances per cast. So if you were to cast one Bloodlance, you can only get a maximum of 4 in total from the aspect, as opposed to effectively hitting every single monster in the pack per cast. Now, the best part about it is that they're not trying to sugarcoat this. They say straight out that this is a nerf to Bloodlance in general, because it absolutely is. Whoa, this is indeed a nerf to Bloodlance, but Bloodlance has been so good for Necromancers that's been crashing the game with an exclamation point. Now, so good that it was crashing the game is an interesting way to speak to like completely unintuitive, underwhelming, ridiculously gear dependent. But you know what? Let's not sit here and just complain about blood builds all day. But the next part of it is very important to understand, and that is this is a temporary solve while the team reworks the way the legendary aspect will function. And we expect this change sometime in Season 1 or shortly after. Now, depending on how quickly we rotate from season to season, this might mean that we either have some downtime between Season 1 and Season 2, or we're not going to see this fix until into Season 2. But it looks like that's related specifically to the aspect, and potentially after they fix the aspect, the enhanced Bloodlance should be able to return to effectively having the chance of piercing infinitely. But at least for right now, Bloodlance should be usable in its current state, and the expected maximum outcome from Hungry Blood is actually something that you could effectively calculate at this point, since before it was technically infinite, and now you know you will only ever get 3 total bonus Bloodlances from cast. What this might also mean is that putting Hungry Blood onto a two-handed weapon, getting up to a 40% chance, might now be necessary for a blood build to be able to get the maximum benefit out of it. The only issue being that typically on Bloodlance, you're using the fastest weapon possible. Since you don't care about weapon damage, you don't even care about stats on the weapon other than overpower, because overpower is a interesting mechanic where most things don't work with it. But either way, Bloodlance should be functional walking into Season 1, and at the very least right now in the game as it currently stands in the Eternal Realm. And yes, this is ultimately a nerf, but at least now you should be able to play it. So I think that in general, this is a good change. It's a good way of fixing it until they can get a more permanent fix in place. It just kind of stinks that a build that was already incredibly mechanically heavy and very difficult for players to get into now has a lower top end of expected output. This might mean that people who were like just sitting purely on Bloodlance might have to look into alternative ways of getting more overpower onto the build, either re-adding back in Blood Surge for like a pure blood version of the build, or maybe just accepting the fact that this is a nerf and just hoping that it works out for the best. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that it got you the answers that you were looking for, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.